Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.
Right now. Welcome, everyone, to the 26th episode of the Blacks in Technology audio podcast. I'm your tech host for this evening, Greg Greenlee. It is January 4th, 2012, and this is the first audio podcast of the new year, and a very exciting podcast at that. We have tonight a guest on our show. We have Anjuan Simmons out of Houston, Texas. Anjuan is a freelance technology writer, public speaker, and we're actually going to be talking about the state of minorities and the technology industry, as well as how to take action as opposed to just talking about it. So I want to welcome Anjuan to the show. Thank you, Anjuan, for joining us tonight.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So give us a little background on just where you're from and what your background is in information technology.
Sure. So I was born in Corpus Christi, Texas. And I'm all Texan. I grew up in a town called Wichita Falls, Texas, which is another small town in North Texas. And I, got my start in technology at a very early age. In fact, my mother recently told me that I went to a garage sale when I was probably in my fourth grade and got a Commodore 64. And so, so I remember taking that little kind of black integrated, unit that had that built-in keyboard and hooking it up to the black and white TV in my bedroom and just learning to play games and learning a little basic. And I eventually stuck with technology. I was actually in a program in high school that was designed to help minorities get into technology fields. And so I eventually decided to major in electrical engineering, at the UT Austin. And so I graduated from UT and I went into IT consulting because I felt that I wanted to, combine my engineering training with the ability to solve real business problems. And so I thought, well, I could become an engineer, but I thought that I would be that kind of guy who's, in the basement, designing circuits. But I really wanted to make sure that I had the opportunity to see how can I apply my engineering training to real-world business problems. And so I worked for a company that did that, and so I learned to use what I knew about technology and then combine that with solving real-world business problems. And so I've been an IT consultant ever since. And so my entire career, I would say, spans 20 years, but my hardcore career as an adult technologist is more like 15 years.
Gotcha. That's interesting. I actually I went to school as well for computer network engineering, and it's funny because I don't use anything in engineering. I mean, you use the critical thinking skills that you gain from engineering, but as far as some of the skills that I've learned in things like DC circuits, AC circuits, I pretty much don't use any of those skills at all. But it's interesting that you went from electrical engineering and kind of morphed that into a technology consultant career. Now, I read here that you help companies understand and implement enterprise software solutions. Tell us what exactly does that mean?
Right. So I've worked for Anderson Consulting and for Deloitte, and I'm currently with a company that's similar in size to those. It's based in India, though. And so these are the, big guys, right? These are the IT management consulting companies that do, Fortune 500 clients. And so when I say enterprise software applications, those are the Oracles, the SAPs, the, other ERP systems that are designed for, billion-dollar companies that have hundreds of thousands of people working there. And so my role has followed a path where, when I first started out, Anderson Consulting, fresh out of college, doubly degree in hand, like you, I didn't use any circuit analysis or PSpice or anything like that. But it's exactly what you just described. Anderson back then was really building up their technology practice, and they wanted people who knew how to think, right? And they saw that engineers and computer science and all of those other, STEM fields produce people who had great critical thinking skills. And so, they gave us all the personality training, how to be a true charismatic person and how to, woo clients. But that was easy for them, right? But they really wanted those critical thinking skills. And so, I started out doing very technical work, whether it was, writing PL SQL scripts to build these interfaces or doing a little bit of database administration, things like that. But, as I got promoted and as I rose through the ranks, I eventually got into lead roles, right? And so, and this ties into a topic that I hope that, we talk about later, and that is, when we talk about getting minorities into technology, often it's those kind of hand on the keyboard, programming environment up roles where, you're doing infrastructure support, where you're deploying servers, or you're a hardcore programmer, or you're, supporting databases, right? What's that?
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Right, and those are great, and I think that if we can dramatically increase the number of minorities who do those functions, then we will be making great progress. However, I really hope that we can go beyond those functions that are very technical, but also tie those in to, well, what is the business need, right? Why do we have all these databases and application servers and web servers? What is the business need? And so anytime that I had someone who I mentor who was a person of color, I always try to impress upon them and to answer your question, right? Technology supports the business. It's not the other way around. The technology function exists to solve some business problem. So no matter where you are, whether you are a DBA, whether you are a network admin who can make Cisco routers, dance, whether you are the best Java programmer in the state, you need to understand what are the business functions being supported. Is this the system for turning orders into bills that are used to bill customers? Is this a marketing tool? Is this a customer support tool? What part of the business is using this? Is it their customer service department? Is it their marketing department? Is this more of a kind of C-suite tool? Because people who can make that jump from being hardcore technologists to understanding how the technology function is based upon business functions and also business needs, those are the ones who become hard to replace, right? Because, again, Infosys is a company that I work for. It's a great company. It's based in India, right? And so many of those hardcore technical skills, and we've seen that for the past almost decade, they'll get a DBA from Mumbai, or they'll get a Java programmer from Manila, they'll get someone who can remotely access a Cisco router from, Moscow, who will work for, 30 to 40% less than you will. However, what they cannot easily replace are people who know what is the business. How can we translate these business needs into technology requirements, and how can I communicate those technology specifications back to the business? Because that's where the offshore process often breaks down. It's when we take our ability to know technology, we marry that to understanding business, and on top of that, we can communicate that to the business. That's when you have career security. That's when you're able to really, I think, rise to where I want minorities to be, which is not just being technologists, but being trusted advisors to the business.
That's a very interesting thought that you have there, because a lot of times that's missed on people. I mean, even like me, I'm one of those hardcore technologist guys. I love the ones and zeros and everything associated with it. But I have found out that as I go further in my career, being able to translate that into a business need is something that I for myself need to actually become better at. And even with working with some higher level C personnel, like vice presidents or CTOs or someone like that, one of my best bosses was a guy who had that knack, had that ability to translate the IT world into the business world. And he always said that IT should be an enabler in the business. And so even with Blacks in Technology, one of our first and foremost things is about technology itself, as opposed to the business aspect. And I've always wanted to kind of infuse that thinking as well into the site. So yeah, that's very interesting. So you do public speaking as well. How did you get into becoming a public speaker?
Yeah, it was very much by accident. So, it's interesting. I've always been told from middle school that I spoke well, right? Often, we all can recall being called on in school to read in front of the class. Yeah. And so whenever I would do that, some people are terrified of that, of everybody looking at them and everybody hearing their mistakes. But I never was afraid of that. In fact, I always sought to find opportunities to speak in public. And so whenever there was an event where someone had to give the occasion or someone had to, speak, I was always the guy who raised my hand. And so as time went on, this went from something that I had kind of a vague interest in to something that I began to seek out, right? So, it really wasn't until I think I got into high school and, I was one of those guys who was the president of my senior class. And so I guess that early leadership ability began to manifest itself. But that's when I really began to see that, okay, people seem to like to hear me talk. And so, I began to, find little speaking engagements around the small town that I went to. But it really wasn't until I started my career that I began to realize that the ability to communicate clearly is a key competence. It's not an option, because when people ask me about public speaking and how to do it, right, their first question is, how do I make money doing it, right? And so, which is a very fair question, but my advice to them is, well, the first thing that you have to do is master your craft, right? If you want to be a public speaker, you have to make public speaking your craft. You have to take care of your instrument, which is your voice. That means that, if you smoke, you probably got to stop smoking. That means that you have to learn how to breathe properly when you speak. And I will tell, because I actually, in high school, was part of a poetry team where we would basically perform poems, right? So this is kind of my liberal arts. So I have my whole technology side, and I have my liberal arts side. And so I did a lot of Langston Hughes poems, because I was in that, Malcolm X phase where I was really into, Black Harlem back during the, 50s and 60s. And so I was really into Langston Hughes and, other Black poets from that time. And so interpreting those poems and performing them was one way that I really began to really hone my craft and understand how I could use my voice to not only communicate, but to also influence how people felt. And so, again, I tell people that the best way to become a public speaker is to master your craft, and the best way to do that is to practice. In fact, take every opportunity that you have when you're speaking in public to do it right. Whether you're giving a status report in your weekly status meeting, just speak. Use your diaphragm. Speak clearly. Speak slowly. Take your tone down maybe one notch, and take every opportunity whenever there are people around. And I don't care if you're going to the post office to buy stamp. Speak to the teller. With force, and just practice that. They may think that you're crazy, but by doing that, by taking every opportunity to hone your craft, that's the first step into becoming a public speaker. And I think one somewhat recent, milestone for me that really helped me see that my work in being a public speaker over the years is paying off is I got my MBA a couple of years ago, right? So I started in 2008 and I graduated in 2009. And every class when we graduate has what's called a student speaker. And for years, the president of the MBA, student government, was automatically the student speaker, right? That person would represent the class based on their position as, president. However, the year that my class graduated, for the very first time, they had an election process where the class would nominate members who were good speakers in class. So, whether it was in accounting or marketing or doing, case studies or whatever, we often had opportunities to speak. And so I was voted to be student speaker, right? So, out of a class of about, 80 or 90 people, my classmates who were all MBA students, right? So this is all graduate level stuff. Thought that my performance in class over the, almost 2 years that we were together merited that honor, right? So on graduation day, in front of all my classmates, in front of all their families, in front of a lot of faculty, I gave a speech to my MBA class, right? And so that was really a great honor, but that really began to really push me towards saying, okay, this public speaking thing is working out pretty well, and I began to get tools together that I used to, that led to getting paid gigs. And I can go into some of that if you want.
Oh, sure. Definitely.
Okay. So again, kind of going from mastering your craft to going toward becoming a paid speaker, you know, my first advice is, you know, going a step past taking every opportunity you can to speak, you should take every opportunity that you can to actually do speeches, right? So Toastmasters is one that I know a lot of public speakers use. I've gone to a few meetings, and I think that they are very helpful. However, it's not until you're actually in a room, your own program, you have people looking at you, that's when you really get into understanding how public speaking works. And so I always advise people to look for those, right? I even do a Google alert for call for speakers or public speaker wanted whatever, and Google Alerts, I'm sure that you've used them, right? So it'll basically use Google, search for those terms, right? And then it'll send you an email that whenever it finds those terms, then it'll send back results. And so you can scan through those results and say, oh, I see that this conference down the road in Austin needs a public speaker. And I would apply. And by doing that, I built out a portfolio of speaking opportunities that became my speaking resume. So I advise people to do that. I've spoken at South by Southwest twice. I'm having my third time this March. So going to conferences. And one other kind of career building tip that I often give to people is you have to build your personal brand both inside your company and outside. And one of the best ways to do that is to find conferences that are in your field, right? So South by Southwest is this great general technology / creative conference, which is great to become visible, but you have to begin getting under your belt those speaking opportunities. And I'm telling you, conference planners are often desperate to find people to speak. So often there's a large amount of demand, but the supply is pretty small. So if you look with any kind of effort, you'll find opportunities to speak. And so the third quick tip that I'll share is you want to have your kind of marketing items together, right? So I created something called a speaker one sheet, which is a kind of like it sounds, right? It's one page front and back that lists, you know, my name is Anjuan Simmons. I'm a, you know, speaker. Here are the things that I talk about, right? So it's a lot of technology and things like that. Here are my credentials, my degrees, and, you know, where I've worked. I also have on the back side pictures of me speaking before groups and testimonials. And so that's a nice little kind of crisp thing that I print out in color that whenever I speak somewhere, I can leave it on a table somewhere, or whenever someone is asking me to speak, I can send it to them. And that's a great way to just look like a pro. And so those are, you know, what I can share without taking up the entire time that we have, that I can share kind of what I've learned about doing public speaking. And again, part of what I talk about to my mentees when I discuss a career in technology is if you can master speaking in front of groups and doing it well, that is an awesome way to take your career by the horns and got it. Because, again, most people, one of the biggest fears people have is public speaking. And you can approach that without fear and with skill and with confidence. Then when they have that board meeting or when they have to talk to the client to get them to buy that project, to use your company for that project, you will be immensely more valuable than someone who wants to sit in the back of the room and just take notes. I mean, you're doing this podcast, right? I tell people, you know, do a podcast. That is a great way to, one, show a global audience that you have expertise, and two, that's public speaking, right? Like you and I are creating something that will be posted to the internet to be consumed by anyone with an internet connection. And so, you're doing a great example of public speaking. So, again, I'm passionate about this topic. I hope it comes through. But I really think that every technologist, especially minorities, have to add public speaking to their list of skills.
That's a lot of great information there. A lot of times people don't tend to think, along in those terms as far as being a public speaker, because like you said, most people are kind of afraid to get up in front of an audience. But if you can actually show them the worth of being a good public speaker and show them the value of it, I think a lot more people will actually try to kind of get into it. And you're also
Absolutely.
a writer. You're also a writer. You've been featured in publications such as USA Today, Black Enterprise, Huffington Post, NPR's Morning Edition. So you're pretty busy. How do you find time to juggle all that?
Yeah, and to just add to the mix, right? I'm married to a beautiful woman. We'll make 10 years in March. I have 3 great kids. The oldest is 6, so you see that they're close in age. So it's not easy, but writing is something that, like speaking, that I just love. And I've had the opportunity to write not only for the publications that you mentioned, but Black Web 2.0, which you probably know about, is Angela Benton's one of her web properties. I wrote for about a year for that online publication. I actually, to answer your question, had to stop because my career started taking off, and I didn't have time. So I can't do it at all, but I do a lot because, one, I love what I do, right? I love the technology. I love helping clients. I love public speaking, and writing is just that. And so to answer your question again, I got into writing at an early age, and it's funny, and, this really speaks, as I'm explaining it to you, how much those formative years of, I would say, probably 3rd grade, 4th grade through high school are so important to who we become. Because just like my public speaking career began in kind of middle school to high school, my love for writing started there as well. And, like most people who love writing, I was a big-time reader. And so I was that comic book geek who was always in the comic book shop seeing what could I get for my, $3, that I got from my parents each week. I was a big Tolkien, reader, so I read Lord of the Rings, and so basically all the movies that Hollywood is getting on now, I was into that 20 years ago, right? So, I knew about Frodo, and I knew about, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, everything that Hollywood's basically doing right now. That's what I was reading in probably 3rd or 4th grade, right? And so my love of reading gave me a love for the written word, which gave me a love for being a writer. And so I would always relish those writing assignments that most people hate that we would get, whether it was like a class on literature or even a project for like, chemistry where we would have to write some kind of report. I just really love writing. And so, again, when I was in high school, there was this contest that I believe it was maybe my 10th grade teacher in English took one of our so we all basically had to write a piece. And she took some of the best ones and submitted it to some kind of local writing contest. And I ended up winning. So I got a check for like $300, right? So think about it. I'm like a sophomore in high school. This is like, 1992. That's a lot of money. And so I thought, this to this writing thing, right? I can write stuff on paper and, like, get money for it. So that's when I realized that writing is not only fun, but you can make money doing it. And so I've been able to leverage what I do as a, writer to, one, make money, but two, to write about things that I'm passionate about. And again, very much one thing that you've probably seen in my life is that love for technology, which goes from, what I do to make money, right? I'm a IT executive at a company, but what I also do to not only make money but to have fun, what I do as a public speaker and what I do as a writer. So technology runs through it all, but I found multiple outlets for that technology competency.
And you basically just touched on exactly what I was going to say. I was going to commend you on your accomplishments as well as how technology actually manifested itself in each stage in your career. First you started out as the kid with the Commodore, and then that led to you had in high school brushes with public speaking and public and writing, but as you got more into technology, you got into engineering, and those same things came about again and flourished into what seems to be a really prosperous career. So it's great to hear.
Thank you.
Let's talk about some of the other things that you're passionate about when you do public speaking, or when you do articles in these certain publications, and that's social media, having equal access to technology, careers in technology, and IT leadership. Now, one of the biggest things that we're hearing on Twitter and is diversity in technology. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let me hear some of your thoughts on that. How we move from just talking about it to action.
Right, and that's a great topic, and I'm glad that it's on the docket for this show. Before I go into that, into my answer, and it ties in. One thing that I advocate for is what I've, shared with you, and that is, public speaking, writing, things like that. But there's a price that you pay for doing that, right? So social media is, I think, one of the most powerful forms for advocacy, for change. We see that with the awakening, Arab Spring, as some people call it, that went through the Middle East, from Tunisia to Egypt to Libya, where people who have been oppressed for decades, if not centuries, turn to social media to organize, to uprise, and to overthrow these dictators that had power for generations.
Yeah.
And so I think that as minorities in a country that is so technology rich, we're not really taking full advantage of that. So along with social media and this great platform and the potential, you also get the fact that you open yourself up to be criticized. And I'm sure you've gone through this as well, but, I've written things for Black Web 2.0 on my personal blog, or just posted something on Facebook where you get backlash, right? And I think that...
Fortunately, I haven't had to suffer through that yet, but I'm pretty sure it'll be coming in the future.
Keep on doing what you're doing. But, I advocate that minorities get into technology, and I also advocate that we use social media. But part of that is we have to get used to those critiques, we have to grow thicker skin, because when you put yourself out there, whether you're a liberal or a conservative or you're for technology or against it, there will be people who disagree with you. And that's fine. I think that disagreement is healthy, because ideally that disagreement will lead to a conversation.
Yes.
But you have to be willing to go through some people who don't want to talk with you. They want to argue with you. They want to, attack you. They want to do name-calling, things that come in, to me, are very unproductive. However, the beauty of it is that for every one person who does that, who just simply wants to argue, there are 9 people who are willing to hear you out and to have a discussion, right? I saw this. So I've seen that happen to me, and to be honest, it doesn't happen very often. I mean, I'm a very diplomatic person. I always try to see the other side, but it has happened to me, and I've gotten a very thick skin. I think that that's good. But Gene Marks, and I think that you posted a link on Google Plus, and maybe someone else did. But Gene Marks wrote an article in Forbes called "If I Was a Poor Black Kid," and you probably heard about that, right? Yeah, I read
that article, and I'm actually going to talk about another article. I don't know if you read another article kind of along the same lines called "4 Things I Learned from Coaching Poor Black Kids," written by James Marshall Crotty. Once we get to that point, I'm going to read you like the first 3 paragraphs of this, and then we're going to talk about this, because it's a very, very interesting article. But even more interesting is the discussions, the debate, the comments after the article. But I'm gonna read you a few paragraphs. I'm going to get to that point and get your reaction, and then we can talk about that as well. But go ahead.
Got it. Well, exactly, and I'm looking forward, to that segment. But I saw Gene Marks get attacked, and I wrote a response that I got on Black Web, and that I posted, or that I will post to my blog shortly, because I really think that Gene Marks had good intentions. I think his heart was in the right place, but he just had no idea what he was talking about. And I think that so many people took that article as an opportunity to attack him. And, he's a self-described, middle-aged, mediocre, white accountant, right? So, people took that as an opportunity to attack him as a white person, trying to tell black people what to do, which he kind of was doing. But I think that he really was trying to help. And my response to him was not an attack. It was, let's have this conversation. Let's look at what you're saying. Here are things that I agree with what you're saying, and it's probably only 20%. But here's why the other 80% is so off-key that if you would have made just a few adjustments in how you approach this topic, it would have been much more effective. And so I say that to say that social media is this great platform, but to be effective in using it, then we as minorities, and you probably read the reporting from Pew that has shown for at least the past 2 years that minorities are outpacing the majority in terms of, using Twitter and using YouTube and using all this technology. So we're getting involved in it, but it's too much, in my mind, content consumption, right? We look at YouTube videos. We read tweets from celebrities and athletes. We follow famous people on Twitter. But we really need to change that to content creation, where we make YouTube videos about what's happening in our communities. We become Twitter experts in our fields, whether that's networking and server maintenance. And so we build our online brand as experts that people come to us and say, you wrote this blog post about how to increase the effectiveness of a virtual server by 10%. Wow. Can you visit my data center so that we can let you look at our VM server stats? We need to get to that point, because that's when we're using social media not as a vehicle for entertainment, and there's nothing wrong with that, but by going beyond that, we can really use it as a vehicle for advancing our personal interests and really raising awareness that minorities are not only using technology, but they're leveraging it, right? We are leveraging it to advance ourselves as professionals, to make our issues known. And I really think that's going to be one major vehicle for minorities to make progress out of so many issues that plague us. And so that's why I'm so passionate about technology and what it can do to really do societal change.
I agree totally with your assessment, especially when it came to about what you were saying about developing a thicker skin. And I think, with some of the recent debates that were going on in the Twitter world with the Michael Arrington comments, it kind of even brought that out more, that because when I read or listened to his little blurb about, him not knowing any entrepreneurs, to be honest, I really didn't care. To the point to where we need to focus more on action than we do what Michael Arrington says. Not in the sense of, what he says doesn't affect me, or it doesn't. But what I'm trying to say is, I wasn't affected to the point to where I wanted to go ballistic on Michael Arrington. I pretty much was like, we need to do something to where those types of comments hold no water, period. To me, and this is just my opinion, to me, some of his, parts of his comments held a little water, simply because we're not in the technology field in abundance like we could be. And if we want to change that, then we have to do something. This is not anything that, Michael Arrington is going to change, or anybody in Silicon Valley is going to change. It's something that we have to change as far as our approach to technology, our approach to being intellectuals, our approach to education. This stuff has to start with us. So that's why I say, his comments, pretty much I could care less, because there are bigger things and bigger issues that we need to focus on beyond his comments right now.
You're exactly right, and this ties into part of the question that you were asking me about was, what can minorities do to move from asking people like Arrington and they get recognition by all the heavyweights from venture capitalists and angel investors, and all that's fine. But in fact, the panel that I'm going to be on at South by Southwest is exactly that. How can we, as minorities in technology, change the conversation from, hey, South by Southwest, can you please let us present? Can we please have a panel? Arrington, can you please recognize entrepreneurs of color? Google, can you please hire more black engineers? And, basically going someone asking for something to we're people who are offering you something, right? I'm not coming to you, take. I'm coming to you,
us.
right? And so that's what we're going to talk about. And, and again, if you think I'm passionate about writing and speaking, I'm really passionate about this because as a minority, right, I've gotten the looks when I walk into a room full of, non-minorities, and people say, "Who are you?" I didn't think, they didn't say this, but the look was like, I thought that the janitor didn't show up until after 8, right? Because, again, often the only people of color who I saw were the people who came to clean the building when I was working late, right? So, I'm used to getting those looks where they wonder, you can't be the team lead, you can't be the business analyst because you don't look like other technical people or whatever that we're used to seeing come through that door. So, I'm not saying that overt racism exists, but I think that subconsciously it's absolutely there, right? So the minority who has gotten those looks, one thing that I've had to master is what I call overwhelming competence, right?
Yeah.
And not only that, but overwhelming excellence. Because people may question you when they first meet you based on, the color of your skin or your ethnic origin, whatever. But people don't question excellence. People don't question competence. People don't question the ability for you to make money for the company. And so when you bring that to the table, they say, well, you don't look like the last guy, but have a seat, right?
Yeah.
Because let's go ahead and work out this work plan. Let's draw up the statement of work because you're the guy who has the knowledge that we need to be successful. So we have to go to, again, not asking, but to giving things. And we do that by displaying overwhelming excellence that whether you have never seen a black person before or honestly you're an out-and-out racist, you can't argue against that, right? Or let me say this. It's hard to argue against that because they see the value. And I think that by bringing our value to the conversation, that's when we really change that conversation. And I think that we go from being in positions of having to ask and beg to positions of having of being able to discuss and dictate, right? And that's really where I think that we need to go because, we have a black man in the White House. Then let's just be blunt, right? There's not a lot of kind of runway left in saying, oh, society is so racist and unfair. Even though, Countrywide Home Loans, who, by the way, is who I got my mortgage through, right? I write a check every month for the mortgage on my house to Countrywide. They were recently, found by the Department of Justice to have engaged in unfair lending practices to minorities, right? Meaning that they would often take very unfair mortgages, or they would try to funnel minorities into subprime loans, right? So clearly racism still exists, but this country has gotten, I think, past the point where you can really talk about that a lot. I think we still need to call attention to bad actors and people who engage in bad behavior, but we really have to go into, I'm here to add value. I'm here to help build this company up. I'm here to make this company more operationally efficient, to decrease costs, increase revenues. And that's why I said at the top of the show, right, that's why we have to go from being simply technologists to being trusted advisors to the business, right, in our everyday jobs, right, because that's when you really get a seat at the table. And it doesn't matter what Arrington thinks, right? Because you're building a company that he's going to want to invest in, right? And so that's we change the conversation, and that's where I think we need to go.
Now, let me ask you this. This very, very informative and interesting dialogue there. Well, let me ask you this. Then how do we, as black people, engage more black people when it comes to, becoming the creators? How do we get to that point? Because, what I'm actually trying to do with Blacks in Technology is increase, or not increase, but change how we are presented, or how even technology is presented to black people as a whole. We have, I kind of feel like we have to control the media in which we are displayed. So, with the site, I'm trying to, do more of these podcasts, so more of us can speak. So, if there's any young people or any, adults that are trying to get into technology, they can hear this and they can say, hey, these guys, they sound like me. They're into technology. There should be no reason why I can't get into it. Or, even going into the realm of a video or, publications. Mm-hmm. So how do we move beyond simply saying okay, yeah, we know what we need to do, but how do we go about actually doing it?
Brother, it's exactly what you're doing. I mean, you are the solution. You and everybody else out there who is doing a podcast, writing a blog, on YouTube, engaging in that creation, because we often underestimate how important it is to have role models. But
yeah,
having role models is so important to building up that pipeline, because part of the problem in getting black people to get it, and I'm trying to get away from, this podcast is Blacks in Technology, but there are other minorities that I also want to pull along with us, right? But, part of the problem is that we don't have that pipeline, because to get into technology, you often have to go and do hard things, right? You have to study engineering and often calculus and chemistry and, know how binary works and all these things that people often, there's hardcore math and things like that. And people often, get, they're afraid of that. But we have to build that pipeline of young people who are, again, this is going back to my experience, right, 3rd or 4th grade, where they see someone on Twitter or Facebook who they went to church with. And they're like, I see him talking about, he's going to speak about cloud computing at this podcast, or he seems to talk about something about, how we can virtualize servers and, and save, money and be more scalable and whatnot at this other conference. And so by increasing the visibility, and this is why I'm big on public speaking and writing, because by doing that, you build a cloud of role models that surround young people and even people who are older, who are already in college or maybe working, to say, okay, I see people who look like me doing what I want to do, therefore it seems a little bit more possible that I can do it too. And that's why I'm really into not only, what I do, but that speak at conferences and come on shows like this to increase visibility, because I want to be what someone was to me when I was in 3rd or 4th grade, showing me not only how the game works, but that I can be a player, and to raise up that next generation of people who in 10 or 15 years I want to see come through the door for a job interview, so that I can interview them, and if they're qualified and if they show excellence, to give them that job, right? So we really need to be visible. I'm even a fan of what I'm seeing online, right? And so as we get, we often, talk about how there aren't a lot of good TV shows that show black people and minorities. They often fall prey to stereotypes. Well, you got YouTube, you got this global platform. That's why there's a web series called Awkward Black Girl that I can relate to because I'm not a girl. I am kind of awkward, but so I probably don't play to the audience demographic that when the creators of that series thought about. But it's a great show. It has great production values. It's funny, and it's something that people probably on a budget of, let's say, I don't know, $5,000, if not less, can put on to YouTube, get a following, create a brand, and before you know it, they may get the green light to create, to do like a demo for a TV studio or whatever, right? So, I'm a fan of doing that because by having web series like Awkward Black Girl and series like it, we see people saying, wow, there are these technology tools that are low cost, that are global, that are easy to use and getting easier, where you can create quality productions that rival what you see on NBC and CBS and all these other stations, and if you can build an audience through that. And so, I really think that a big part of solving the pipeline problem is solving the visibility problem. And on top of that, mentoring. I'm a big fan of mentoring. I have many mentees, whether they're virtual through social media or physical, because I think I have an obligation to do what I call lift as I rise, right? As I rise up in my career, I need to lift up someone behind me. In fact, if there are people, if no one is benefiting from my career success, I'm doing something wrong. Because especially as a minority, where I see every day the challenges and issues that my people face in not being in such a rich sector like technology, I have an obligation to help someone come up behind me to try to help them avoid my mistakes and to hopefully allow them to experience my success a lot faster than I did.
Yeah, and that's to be commended as well. That's one of, that is the primary reason behind Blacks in Technology, why I felt that, a site like it needed to be created was, and I say, I usually say this during a lot of podcasts, is because, when I was at some of these quote unquote geek hacker conferences, there wasn't a lot of black attendees, black participants, period, whether it's speakers or attendees, and I felt, that's, it's kind of a shame, and there needs to be something done, and I want to be the one that, to try to help the next person, come up through technology, just by presenting an image of the black tech, from our perspective, so that they can see that it's not rocket science. It can be challenging, and it does require you to have some type of intellectual prowess, but it's not anything that that can't be done. And the more that we are presented in that image, I think the likelihood of someone else, getting into the career is just that that more likely. So I love what you said about that. I love how you go about approaching it as well. I do want to make an offer to you. Blacks in Technology is going to be coming out with another part of our site or our brand called Tech Digest, the Blacks in Technology Digest, which is going to be a collection of articles written by Black technologists on various IT topics or technology topics, ranging from virtualization to operating systems to IT business, and we're looking for guest writers, people who want to submit an article to be posted. Hopefully, it'll be up within the next month or so. So if ever you want to submit an article to be posted on there, just let me know. I would definitely like to have you. Now, I want to get into this article I was referencing earlier by what's his name, James Marshall Crotty. He wrote an article called 4 Things I Learned from Coaching Poor Black Kids. And the poor black kids are in quotes. And as I read like the first few paragraphs, you'll understand why. And he starts off by saying, here we go again. First, Gene Mark's simplistic Forbes column, If I Were a Poor Black Kid, and now the inevitable knee-jerk backlash. The song remains the same. White folks pontificating in broad generalities about black folks, and black folks lecturing white folks with the same tired arguments about the historic and structural causes of black male academic underachievement. You think that the election of an African-American president would put an end to this nonsense, but it seems to have made it worse. Here's a suggestion. Please, for the love of God, stop this obsession with race and the polarizing, unhelpful discussion of white privilege, as if white imperialism was, and forever will be the cause of all that ails people of color. Instead, for once already, let's talk about real people as they are, not in some aggregated, delusional, white, middle-class male fantasy, but in their fuzzy, messy, defiantly indefinable humanity. Let's talk about John, Jim, Reginald, Ryan, Jordan, and yes, Kevin. Let's talk about their individual struggles to succeed. Let's talk about their highly particular schools and about the particular things those particular schools are doing, often against daunting odds, to ensure academic greatness for their particular set of students. Let's talk about these important things without all the leftist tropes trotted out to explain and, yes, justify failure, including historic inequality, classism, social injustice, race, and the undeniable privileges that come by virtue of race. All you racism cataloging wannabe Cornel West, please hold your indignant finger pointing for just a nanosecond. That's the first 3 paragraphs. And he pretty much goes on to talk about how we need to move the conversation beyond the oppressive talk. And in some ways, I kind of agree, but just like Gene Marks, it seems to me like he misses the point. And there's a really good debate between him and a black guy at the end of this article, and they pretty much go back and forth, and he kind of talks about some of this guy's contradictions in what he was saying and how he approaches things, and as he what's his name, James, he pretty much tries to defend himself, but it seems like he misses the point. And the guy at the end of the article is basically saying the injustice is done when you don't talk about it. He said you do more damage to these kids when you don't talk about, the inequality, the classism, and you go around, as if this stuff does not exist. Very interesting article. What are some of your thoughts about? Because, and real quick, I can see where he was going with it. I can see and kind of understand what he was trying to say as far as let's move beyond the talk, because it's from his article, it sounds like he's saying the more we talk about it, the more these kids are going to give into it.
Yeah, so my first response is let's have a conversation about this. And, I wrote a response to Gene Marks, and I won't have time to respond to this gentleman, James Marshall Crotty. But what I would say, and, I pulled up this article, and I'm looking at it while I speak.
Okay. I was going to forward you the link.
Yep, I have it pulled up.
Gotcha.
So, on one hand, I applaud him for doing, assuming that is true, what he described in this article, for actually going into the communities where minorities, live and actually engaging them, right, to coach them. I think that he gets points from me for actually doing what I think few people who are in the majority actually do. On the other hand, I think that this is another example of the fact that I think white people, and I'm a very, I don't really see and think about this as a white guy, an Indian guy, a black guy, and Haitian guy, whatever. I acknowledge the different histories, but I think that with that caveat being thrown out there, white people have a hard time discussing race. And and again, I think that that Mr. Crotty, that his heart is in the right place, but I think that when you don't have to see it every day, when you don't have to deal with it every day, when you're rarely, besides, I guess, on the weekends when, I guess, like what he does, you drive down to the local hood and teach kids a sport, you are rarely the only person of your race in a room. Probably you're often usually the only person. You're probably often, in a building full of people like you. It's really hard for white people to understand what it's like to be a minority. And, that's not their fault, right? That's just the reality of where we are in history. But when he says, stop talking about race, well, then how do you address what I just talked about a few minutes ago, where a major lending institution is discriminating against people based on their race? When you are messing with one of the most important investments that a person can make, and that's buying a house, and when you're playing games with them in ways that if someone had white skin and they sat down to apply for a home loan, you wouldn't do, or you were less likely to do, how do you address that? And that's just that's just behavior that we catch. There's all kinds of things that go on every day that we don't catch, and it's absolutely not nearly as bad as it was in, let's say, the 30s and 40s and 50s. But it's not sitting around in a circle and saying kumbaya time, right? So I absolutely agree that we have to go beyond blaming race for every problem that plagues our communities, because we have a lot to do with bad behaviors and I think challenging mindsets that persist for a lot of reasons. But race is absolutely a factor. I mean, and I think that this article doesn't really address that. And one thing that I always try to do, and I've been very fortunate to be able to meet people, and I've had neighbors who live, a couple of doors down from me, who are actually honest enough to just have a conversation about this and be honest about it, because, these are uncomfortable conversations, but they're so important to say, look, as a black person, I see this, and this is how it makes me feel. And then a white friend, neighbor says, as a white person, this is what I see. This is what I read. This is how I feel. And it's only when we can get to that level of having honest, respectful conversations that we can begin to find solutions. So where we can close any gaps in understanding so that we can get down to the real problems, because that's the only way that you can solve a problem. I mean, the most unsolvable problem is the one that's poorly understood. And racism is one of the most poorly understood problems in this country. And so, again, my initial reaction is, again, like G. Marks, I think his heart is in the right place. I think he's gone a few steps further in getting to where he hopefully understands, racism and how it affects, real life. But I think it's another example of how, white people, for all the many ones that had good hearts, and I think that most of them do, they just really have a hard time getting it.
Yeah. What do you think technology? Can help close that gap?
Yes, absolutely. Because, I said when we talked about having thicker skin by being involved in social media, that you open yourself up to be criticized. Well, we need thicker skin. We also need thinner tongues. And by that, I mean that not only are you open up to be criticized, you are also able to be a criticizer. And I think that we really need to use social media, and I'm using that specifically because it's one that a lot of people use. It's such a great platform for understanding, and I think that, and to give a sporting example, I think that Michael Jordan did more for race relations when he was playing for the Bulls than probably anybody in the 20-year period before he came onto the scene, because he was this amazing athlete who, again, I'm sure there are many racists who watched Bulls games and cheered on Michael Jordan because he did all this. He had such amazing talent, right? And it's an athletic talent, and I understand some of the challenges by focusing on that. But he, I think, gave people the idea of that there's a black man that I, as a white person, can look up to and admire, right? And in the same way, I think that social media, by using visibility, can let people see that, wow, this black person among my Twitter, or who I follow on Twitter, or I'm friends with on Facebook, whatever, they're concerned about the same things that I'm concerned about. They want to get a good job. They want to give the best possible opportunity for education to the kids that they can afford. They want to try to have a reasonable retirement. These are all the same things that I care about as a white person. And I think that level of visibility, where we see that we have a lot more in common than we have differences, I think that's a powerful way to bury those barriers that we often put up. And and this is usually tough for me to do, but I think that if you only follow on Twitter or friend on Facebook or circle on Google Plus people who are just like you, meaning that they're your same race, they believe the same politics that you subscribe to, they believe your same ideas about religion, then you're not getting it, because it's only when we try to engage people who disagree with us that we can really come to a common understanding and say, you know what, you may be Catholic and I'm Muslim, but I understand you a little bit better because I see what you talk about. You know,
Yeah.
you may be gay and I may be straight, but you know what? You're into tech just as much as I am. So, you know, we have that. And so, again, all these barriers that we have based on categories, I think that social media can help us break through because it's a great way to find shared values and common interests that is global. And, you know, I have actively tried to friend people and engage people who, you know, I'm a Christian, but, you know, I have people who are atheists, people who are Hindu, Muslim, whatever. You know, I'm a heterosexual male. I have people who are homosexual, who are whatever. You know, I am from the South. I have people from the North, people from other countries. So I actively try to friend people who I disagree with on a wide variety of measures and who are completely different from me, because by doing that, I grow as an individual. I often have my beliefs made stronger, but I also better understand people who disagree. And I think that that's a wonderful way to engage in social media.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with that. I have noticed in the past, just attending a lot of these conferences, a lot of them, you know, I'm into, you know, security, network security, and things like that. That, you know, there is some apprehension there whenever I go to these conferences. There's not a lot of people, a lot of black people, a lot of minorities, period, at these conferences. So you know, I guess the stigma associated is, you know, who, you know, it's kind of like, who is this guy? You know, there's a little apprehension in the air. But when you start talking about technology and you start talking about things that, you know, they can relate to as well, all the apprehension goes out the window, and, you know, the barriers kind of break down, and they see you as being a you know, a fellow technologist. So, yeah, I definitely agree. I think that technology is definitely one of the ways that we can begin breaking down these barriers. No, go ahead.
No, I'd say I completely agree. You know, I absolutely agree. You know, I've gotten those looks when I walk into a room that's filled with people who are of a certain demographic, and they're like, okay, I haven't seen someone like you here. But when I open my mouth and begin talking about things that they want to know more about or they also study, then yeah, soon after that, you know, we're sitting down chatting and, you know, chopping it up.
Yeah, definitely. So what's next for Anjuan Simmons? What's on your plate for this year?
Wow, it's a pretty heavy plate. You know, I have a very demanding job. Like I said, I live in Houston. I am recording this from a hotel in Calgary up in Canada. I have a family. I'm involved in community stuff. So I have a lot on my plate, but I think that the one kind of, you know, what's next for me is this book that I'm working on. And you know, nice. It's good that I love writing, because writing a book is really hard, and just finding time to do it is tough. But this is a book that I'm still working on the title and a lot of the details. But, you know, it is one thing that I hope has come clear through this, you know, discussion is, you know, I love technology, and technology has enabled so many wonderful things for me. In my career, and there's also been some good personal life benefits. And it's a collection of principles that I've learned, again, working 20 years in the technology field, that have helped me be successful. And just like I said, that I feel an obligation to help minorities who are where I was, you know, 5, 10, 15 years ago, to just say, hey, here's some things that you need to know, right? And it's part of kind of the speech that I often give to my mentees about here's what it's like being a minority in tech, and just a few things that have helped me. And so I'm writing it down. I'm going through my old notes and my old emails and things that I've written before. And so it ties very nicely into the panel I'm going to be on at South by Southwest. And so some of my preparation for South by Southwest is by writing this book. And I hope to have it out or have it progress to the point where I can talk more about it by the time South by rolls over or comes or happens in March. But, you know, it's a pretty big that I'm climbing. And so, you know, it's something that I probably think is going to be, you know, my primary pet project for 2012 is getting this thing written, getting it published, and then, you know, seeing what it does.
Excellent. Well, definitely when you get to the point where you're ready to launch it, definitely let me know, and, you know, I'll do some, you know, some advertising or whatever on the Blacks in Technology site. You know, we have a bit spotlight on the Blacks in Technology website, and, you know, anytime I can, you know, help out somebody, I definitely will do it. So let me know, and, you know, you got a spot on the site.
Absolutely. I appreciate that.
No problem. Before we head out of here, why don't you give us your Twitter handle, how, you know, people can get in contact with you, some of your URLs.
Absolutely. So I'm very fortunate to have a 6-letter Twitter handle. I have a unique name, so that made it easier. But it's just at Anjuan, so that's ANJUAN. Again, that's ANJUAN. And I'm not the most prolific, you know, tweeter, but I post things that are interesting that I find online and my thoughts. So I'm always happy to get people to, you know, follow me, and I always engage. Anyone who ats me, I always try to reply or you know, retweet. So I absolutely invite anyone who hears this to follow me on Twitter. Facebook is, again, pretty straightforward. It's facebook.com/Anjuan, ANJUAN. And, yeah, go ahead and friend me up. I have over 3,000 friends, so I'm creeping toward that 5,000 friend limit, but there's a lot of room there, so please feel free to friend me. And so there's also my website that I need to update more often, but it's AnjuanSimmons.com. So all one word, ANJUANSIMMONS.com. And that's my own personal scratch pad that's online. So, you know, feel free to subscribe via RSS or, you know, leave a comment on any article that you find that you think is interesting, and I'll be sure to reply. You know, to me, you know, social media is all about the conversation, and I always love having discussions with anyone who wants to talk with me. So I think that people who engage me online will find that I will respond.
Excellent. And
go ahead. Just quick, one other thing coming up in 2012, I'm actually making the move from iPhone to Android. So once my contract with AT&T is up on April 1st, 2012, on April Fool's Day, I will go probably to Verizon and get an Android phone. So that's the other big change for me this year.
Is this a pre-April Fool's joke, or are you really moving to Android?
I wish that I was that clever, but that's AT&T's contractual agreement with me. But no, I think, you know, for a long time I actually was very public, and this is, again, another kind of thick-skinned thing. I was very kind of anti-Android, and I had people who would clown me on Facebook and whatnot, but, you know, Android has grown up a lot in the past couple of years, and I think that the ice cream sandwich, the latest version of Android, finally is at the point where I think it's Apple-like enough, and it has all the power and the ability to customize that I think makes Android beautiful. That I'm ready to go. So I'm looking at the Galaxy Nexus, but I hope to see a lot more options come up in the next 3 to 4 months. But yeah, I'm going to make that switch.
Nice. Well, welcome to the dark side, because I I actually own the Galaxy S2, and I was an iPhone user before, and I switched. I guess the primary reason was I use more Google-based apps than I do iPhone or Apple applications.
Right.
So it made sense to me. On top of that, the phone is a really nice phone. It's not running ice cream, but the operating system, the interface, and everything like that is just as nice, and it's a very powerful phone, and it's a bigger phone, and I like that. That it doesn't have a lot of weight to it. It's lightweight, but I do like that girth as far as the dimensions of the phone. So, yeah, welcome to Android, man. I think you'll like it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, great, Anjuan. I want to thank you for taking some time out and joining me on this podcast tonight. A lot of great information flowing back and forth, and want to wish you well in your endeavors, your future endeavors. Sounds like you're a busy man, and you have a budding career, and I want to say thank you again for taking some time out.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
Great. I also want to. I always do this at the end of the shows. I don't know if you've ever visited the Blacks in Technology site, but it's a community-based site where we talk about technology, and we also talk about some social issues on there as well. But definitely more technology focused than I've seen. A lot of sites, and I mean that pure techie, talk, and there's a wide variety of individuals on there, male and female, from people who are software developers all the way up to IT directors, to other writers and speakers, and it's a free online community. We have a fully functional forum where you can go there. We spark up conversations. There's an online a live online chat functionality to it. There's these podcasts. There's some videos. Like I said, I'm working on releasing another stage of the site called Tech Digest. So it's a growing community. We have about close to 500 members now. Started a couple of years ago, and I just like to always invite my guests to become members.
Absolutely.
Great.
I'm on the site now, and I see the interview that you did with Tiffany in episode 25. Where do I register?
Right, and I'm actually going to be fixing that to have a kind of a join now banner on there, but it's in the on the left hand side in the side column there.
Okay. All right. I'm going to do it now.
Excellent. Thanks again, Anjuan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Take care, Greg.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight on the 26th episode of Blacks in Technology podcast. If you like what you heard, you can follow us on Twitter. That's at Black in Technology, BLKINTECHNOLOGY. You can join the LinkedIn group as well under Blacks in Technology. You can check out our site at www.blacksintechnology.net. And you can send us any suggestions or anything you might want to hear on any future podcasts by emailing us at contactus@blacksintechnology.net. Thanks again for listening, and have a nice night.
Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.